Jonathan Djanogly.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And let me firstly say that I think that this is a first-rate piece of legislation that is timely and important for the ongoing fight against economic crime. And I join many others in the House in saying that it's good to see a minister who has long engaged with these issues presenting the bill. And there have been many excellent and important contributions during this debate. Much of the bill, particularly Part 1, is developing themes that were debated back in 2006 for the Companies Act. And that Act itself was formulated on the basis of many years of consultation. It was the Right Honourable Member for Barking that took that bill through the House. I think it was the longest bill ever. It may still be the longest Act ever. And I had the pleasure of being the shadow DTI minister at the time. And at that time, we proceeded mainly in the spirit of cooperation, as I recall. So it's very appropriate that today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some 17 years later, we are not only co-signing amendments to develop this workstream further, but talking almost one after the other, just like old times. And I certainly think today the Right Honourable Lady made a very important contribution once again. And I said workstream because this is an area, like so many, where development of the law is required because of changes that have taken place through technology and practice, both the criminals and regulatory gaps or inaction. For instance, in 2006, paper registers maintained by companies were the norm, particularly for small companies, and people simply didn't think of identification verification in the way that is now commonly accepted. So moves in the bill, for instance, to require directors and those delivering documents to have their IDs verified and providing for registers to be held centrally are not only better to stop fraud, but are also more transparent and accessible and, frankly, are now the contemporary norm. The general mood at the time of the 2006 Act was, I would say, broadly deregulatory, which is fundamentally why the then Conservative opposition was able to work very well with the then Labour government on that Act. And it has to be said that that was well before 42% of all UK crime was fraud-related, as it is now. And of course, there will always be a trade-off between absolute ease of doing business and upping levels of regulatory checks. But I think for the most part, this bill has got it right, both in terms of improving protections against fraud whilst measuring the mood of business. I would make the cautionary note here that this place can create as many new offences as we like. And other honourable members have made this point. But if they are not enforced and resourced, then nothing will happen. The Companies Act 2006 is actually packed with criminal offences, most of which have hardly ever been prosecuted. I would wager many of them have never been prosecuted at all. I heard the Minister read out a list earlier of must-dos as regards the role of Companies House. But without management and without funding, he should not assume that it's all just going to happen. Of course, enforcement costs money and lack of resource has historically hindered investigation as much as prosecution. I appreciate and welcome that as regards Companies House, the government's intention to change its role from a plain registry to a semi-regulator is being backed up with more money. And I was interested to hear the Minister's view earlier on of new clause 20, which proposes charging a £100 incorporation fee. He was clearly open to looking at reviewing the need of fees based on need. The Companies Act proposal of having a very low fee was to encourage global people to set up companies in the United Kingdom rather than elsewhere. I appreciate that point. But the fee, firstly, should have kept up with inflation, and even at £100, would not constitute a huge sum in order to set up a company. Also, and this is important I think, there are no proposals to raise the minimum capital requirements for new companies, which I think would present a much greater obstacle to new business formation than a reasonable fee proposal. Fees which could go towards enforcement, as my honourable friend for Worcestershire described. There is no doubt in my mind that the challenge facing Companies House in terms of culture change with this new legislation is not insignificant and is going to need some serious managing and monitoring by ministers. New Clause 16 suggesting that the government publish an annual report on the reforms proposed by this bill is a good one. This, for the most part, is not a bill of grand designs or massive innovation. It is moving forward on necessary protections in a measured and forensic way. As the Right Honourable Member for Birmingham Hosh Hill said, it is realistically unlikely that the necessary tweaking will end on the day of this bill being enacted, and reviews are therefore a very good idea. Government Amendment New Clause 15 is welcome recognition of this, although I'm not sure why ministers wish to restrict the reports only to parts 1 and 3 of the bill. Can I also say, in respect of these reports, that I hope that they don't simply look at how we can introduce ever tighter checks. The reports should also review how checks can be done with minimum regulation and maximum efficiency to avoid red tape clogging up business. This, I appreciate, is easier said than done and will require ongoing vigilance and full consultation with practice lawyers and other practitioners. Clause 63, providing for authorisation of corporate service providers, is novel and a significant move from existing company law. However, given the potential for mischief happening in terms of companies being incorporated for illegal reasons, this must be the right way to go. Amendment 63 forces the registrar to carry out risk assessments to establish if the verification of the ID by the provider is likely to give rise to an economic crime. I'm not sure if the wording of the amendment is perfect, but the principle seems sound if we are to have active enforcement. The idea of having unique identities for people dealing with the register will be a significant help to stopping the very real problem of impersonation and companies being hijacked by imposters. However, to get this system working will require a good push, and so I will be interested in the Minister's reaction to Amendment 105. This basically makes this system a duty rather than just something that could be done. Most of the points that I make today are what I would call of a fine-tuning variety. And as I said, the nature of this bill, which is a worthy bill, is that more fine-tuning will be needed as we go along. So an acknowledgement of that from the Minister would be appreciated.
Gavin Newlands.